Yes, we do, to declare a quorum.
Take it away.
So, Chair Stevens.
Yes, ma'am.
Vice Chair Martin.
Present.
Secretary Fletcher.
Present.
Regent Herdink.
Here.
And Regent Witten. Oh, excuse me, Regent Jackson. Sorry about that.
She's not here, but I'm here and glad to serve. Thank you, Pam.
Good, and we are so happy you're here. We have a quorum.
All right.
Oh, James Lee, I think you're muted there if you're talking.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I have a motion that we approve the minutes of the last meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Move second.
And by consensus, do I hear any objections?
Hearing none, we'll move right along to the next item. All right, you have the agenda for Thursday, the 15th. And Hannah, I was wondering if, do you have any, I noticed on the agenda is that we have the orientation with new people, this and that. Can we put a time in case some members may not be able to be there when we start the presentations of the board items? Would that be possible, or what do you think about that?
Put a time. We're starting the orientation at 10 a.m. with the new regents.
Yes.
And then the rest of the board won't need to be there until the noon when we start with our working lunch.
Yes. Would you put that on the agenda so as it goes out that the board members know that? I mean, they're certainly invited to come at the 10 o'clock thing is so that board members know that the official meeting, I guess, will start at 1 o'clock?
It will start at noon. And we will, the times are actually on the itinerary. So they'll have times.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
We start at noon and then we actually will then proceed into the meeting at 1 o'clock.
All right. Thank you, ma'am.
Uh-huh.
Any other questions in reference to that? The agenda items. All right, we're going on down, Hannah, to the board agenda items. Learner success report. Who's going to make that presentation?
I'm going to introduce all of these, James Lee, but learner success will be done through Dr. Williams. Item B will be Jesse Shook. C will be Buddy Combs. D will be Lynn Hillis. E, I would assume, is going to be Regent Fletcher. And then F will be, I don't know, would you want our internal auditor joined to make that, or do you want to make that presentation?
I want him there, but I want Regent Green to do the introductions. What I'm saying is, so I would like those people's name put on there so that I know exactly when we go through that is. Wendy, are you there?
I am.
Okay, tell me about your item on there of we talked very briefly yesterday morning, but can you give me some more details, or you've given me some, can you be prepared to give some recommendations or some information to the entire board?
Yeah, I'll be ready. We don't have any recommendations from the ROC this time. We decided with everything else going on
and resources being pretty spread thin, that it was too much for us to ask for anything additional at this point. So until we get some data back from the Chancellor's office in December and we get the RFP process completed, we decided to make this meeting just informational.
Okay. Can you put please, if possible, can you put a kind of a timeline on that so that board members know your goals and expectations of when things are going to happen? Can you do that for me, please?
Are you talking about for the meeting, or are you talking about overall in general?
Just overall in general.
Yeah, I can
Yeah,
put some slides together for you if you prefer.
yes, I would like some information on that. We will have 2 new students and 2 new regents, and they need to know a little bit about what you're doing and why we're doing it, and then kind of at the end, the timeline on that. But I certainly would appreciate if you could put that together.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other questions or items in reference to of those?
I actually do want to make one comment just based on the update that will be given. So the RFP process is not complete yet with the ROC committee, but we can speak to that. We just won't be able to give a whole lot of detail about that at the September meeting, unless, and Pam and Paul and Hannah, you can tell me, have we had any updates on whether or not those vendors will be able to do presentations prior to that meeting?
Hannah reached out to Becca earlier today. I remember seeing an email, and so hopefully we can at least get those presentations in before the board meeting.
Okay, that would be amazing if they could, but if not, the other thing I want to, I'm sorry. No, I was just saying that's what we've requested from Becca to get those scheduled before the board meeting. So, okay, great. And I think that'll be helpful. That'll give us a little bit more information to be able to share. But there is one thing, and there seems to be, and I'll call it rumor mill at this moment because I'm not exactly sure where it came from. I've been given some information, but I haven't had a chance to follow up with primary source verification. But I want everyone to know, and anybody watching, the ROC committee has never suggested that any schools be closed, that any colleges be shut down, that there be any layoffs, that there be anything that speaks to any kind of reduction across the system. That has never, in capital letters, all capitals, NEVER, never, exclamation point, been talked about in our committee. Not ever. That is not our goal. Our goal is to do exactly what we were charged with doing, which was to evaluate the system, have someone else evaluate the system to make the best use to optimize our resources. I am not going to be the bad guy, the fall guy, or take any blame for anything that happens as a result of this committee's work toward that goal. It is what we were charged with. It is what we will continue to do. But I'm tired of being the brunt of everyone's comments about Regent Fletcher wanting to shut things down. That is not my goal. It is not our committee's goal. And I want to get that out in public, in writing, today, in the minutes. Never, ever, ever, ever have we even entertained that idea. Optimizing resources is a whole different conversation than shutting down colleges, than laying off people. In fact, I have been one of the biggest advocates for our staff, their raises, their retention, their inclusion. So I just needed to take a moment to get that out there. I'm done with this conversation about those being my ideas. Those are not my ideas. Please stop that conversation if you're part of that. Thank you, Regent. Thank you, Chair.
I would like also for you to present that or express that in your comments about the purpose of the committee. And it is not to terminate people or close people, this and that, if you will, Wendy. And I think that I appreciate you saying that. And I think that it is appropriate when you report the committee that everyone needs to know what the purpose of the committee is.
And I believe we have read that charge at every single meeting. So if we need to repeat it, we will repeat it, and we will share that information with the new folks too.
Yeah,
So I'm happy to do that. And again, I'll put together the data we have. I'll put together the information we have from the meetings. Everyone is free to go back and watch those meetings. You will not hear those words. So please do so. Educate yourself, inform yourself. If you need to catch up, if you're a regent, you haven't been able to attend, feel free to go back and watch our 9 hours of meetings. You will not hear those words. So.
Thank you. And I appreciate you clarifying that, and I think it's important, especially with 2 new students and 2 new regents, that everyone understands, not only the old, but the new understands the purpose of why this committee was formed and what its charter is with.
And I think as the new chair, that would be appropriate for you and also for the President Zarapata to share with the PLT and anybody else who needs that information. And if you can't do it, I'll be happy to share it with them.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
We're at Friday. Approval of the minutes on the 9th and 10th of June. Approval of the August the 30th. The consent agenda items. Moving right along. KCTCS Board of Regents Reserve, Paul. Is that the amount of, is that one of the Buddy is working on?
Yeah, and so that is, I think in the past we've talked about, why is the reserve 3%? What should it be? Buddy's done work with the business affairs team and his own team at the system office. They'll be giving a report on that.
Okay. Pam, you have the next item.
So sorry, I was trying to unmute. So we're talking about the executive session, correct?
No,
or have I jumped ahead?
We're talking
Code of ethics.
Code of ethics.
Oh, code of ethics. I am so sorry. I was looking at an email that had come through. I will admit that. Code of ethics for the Board of Regents. We did discuss this. Various regents attended ACCT a trusteeship conference, and we did discuss drafting this. This will only be an information item, as I have not even begun to draft. I did solicit sample code of ethics from ACCT, and Hannah supplied from the AGB, and we will be trying to draft a copy or a sample for the board to review, and that will be placed on the virtual workspace when it is ready.
Wendy, you have a question?
Yeah, I have 2. So the comment about the 3% in reserve, is there a policy about the 3%?
I don't believe so. I think
So that
what was been told in the past anyway is it was the board mandated reserve, but Pam, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe that's in policy anywhere.
No, my understanding was that the policy basically says that the board will determine an appropriate reserve, appropriate funds to be held, but that the 3% was simply a motion that was made long before any of us were actually here. So that is something that needs to be.
So it was probably
discussed.
more of like a chair and presidential or a presidential and board agreement, gentleman's agreement, so to speak.
Potentially, I just honestly can't talk to the history of that. I simply know that it was discussed as being a board decision, but we have not researched to see whether there was a motion or actual passage of a motion in the archived minutes.
I believe that it was recommended as a best practice from a former VP of Finance, but as we've looked at it, we think that it would be better to put in a policy somewhere and research why that would be considered a best practice, and if it is still considered a best practice, or it should be either a higher or lower amount.
Yeah, and
So my comment was going to be, we did hear that at the ACCT meeting, that 3% is kind of a reasonable, what most colleges do. It's kind of a reasonable thing. So we might want to start with them, Hannah, because 2 or 3 of those presidential speakers there, including Dan from Michigan, I can't remember his last name, mentioned that 3%, and that the board, writing a policy saying, that at least 3% would be put in reserve. So we may want to start with them as a resource.
Sure.
And in my conversations with Buddy, as he's looked around at this, he's kind of put guardrails up on each side of it with some triggering mechanisms to where if the economy looks like it's really in a spiral, that's when you go back and adjust these things. But Buddy's going to lay out all the information he's got and then some proposals for the board to consider.
Okay,
Yes.
so that was my question on the 3%. And then I have another question. So as we're talking about the code of ethics for the board, have we also addressed the conflict of interest policy for the cabinet?
So the internal auditors and I are in conversations about that, including I looked at a demo of software that could potentially track that electronically for all high-level employees. That did not pan out. I don't think that that's the way we would go. But there will be a policy for key employees, including the cabinet, the PLT, and other high-level administrators. And then we will track all of that and at times tickle the people who need to redo that. So there will be an annual certification.
Yeah, so would that be an HR function then, if it's not going to be an automatic through the software kind of thing?
Right. We haven't really mapped that out. I actually believe that it may live in this office in the OGC because of the need to determine what is actually a conflict of interest and what is not. Sometimes it's not apparent because it's not definitively statutory. So we would have various buckets, so to speak, where there might be a financial conflict, a familial conflict, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then there might be just a standard old, what is sometimes worse than an actual conflict, which is the appearance of a conflict. And so we would track all that, and I do believe it would actually live in this office.
Would there also be a mechanism within that same policy to be able to track any reports of what appears to be a conflict of interest?
Yes, we can do that. Are you talking about external, internal, both?
Could be either, could be
Okay.
both. So, oftentimes in my line of work, signing a conflict of interest statement to be a speaker at a conference, for example, they always want to know, are you paid by a drug company? Are you part of a speakers bureau? Those sort of things. So, people rarely ever report those things. Most professionals would, but some people don't. And then you get to a presentation and you realize, well, that slide deck I saw at a promotional dinner, for this company or that company or whatever. And
Right.
so sometimes participants at a conference may say, well, they said there was no bias, but actually there was some bias or there was some commercial, propaganda. And so the same sort of thing. Maybe an employee or a Board of Regent member doesn't report that they have a conflict of interest, but someone else, catches wind of someone trying to promote themselves based on their position, or, asking for special favors based on their position. And when we hear those sort of things, we need a mechanism to be able to report it. Not that we couldn't just pick up the phone and call you, but I'm saying I think we need a formalized
Right.
policy
And
around that.
currently, actually, the Ethics Point portal is for fraud, waste, and abuse, as well as other types of complaints. And so if there were a conflict of interest, somebody could report it that way, and they could report it anonymously, or they could report it as, with their name fully on there. So currently we do have that mechanism, but we could reaffirm on the conflict of interest page, whatever we might put on the web page, that this is available to employees, external individuals, et cetera, to report conflicts of interest. And I think those would get to us much more quickly and efficiently, because as soon as someone files that, either through the computer portal or the hotline, it goes immediately and notifies pretty much everyone in my office.
Okay, is that part of the new Regents orientation to talk about ethics point?
I don't think so, but we can certainly put that on the agenda.
And Chair Stevens, would it be appropriate to just remind the board that that is present there as well?
Yes, ma'am. Most certainly would be.
Okay, I'm done. Thank you.
I'm backing up with Wendy's comment about the financial situation and the carryover. I really think we need to have a policy and procedure that if the KCTCS itself or colleges do not have that best practice or 3%, that does not need to be dumped back on the chairman, ever who the chairman may be, is what I'm saying. We have a policy. And I'm sure Buddy will come with some recommendations. So I would say that we need to look at those closely and listen to what he says, he recommends. But I think it's important that we hold accountability for, if we're going to, the best practice 3%, then not only the systems office, but colleges need to abide with that also. Wendy?
So since the colleges have their own state appropriations, would it not be appropriate for us to ask their local advisory boards for their opinion on that before this board would move on that?
Paul or Pam, does not all the money come through the systems office?
It does. And those
colleges is what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, the board mandated reserves affect all 16 colleges. And so this Board of Regents would be the controller of those.
Any other comments about that, Wendy?
I guess I just want to make sure if we need their advice on that. I get that.
You will get feedback from each of the business affairs officers at the colleges have had input on Buddy's report.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions about either one of those items, the carryover or the ethics thing? All right. Next item on the agenda.
I'm sorry, Chair Stevens. I'd just like to clarify what Regent Fletcher was asking. When you said advice or input from their advisory boards, are you talking about the board of directors for each college?
I am.
Okay. I just wanted to make clear for our notes.
I mean, we keep hearing how we have 16 different colleges in 16 unique areas. And I'm just thinking a blanket policy might not really work. Maybe we do need to consider local, adjustments somehow. I don't know. I want to be sensitive to that local board.
That's a good point, Regent Fletcher, considering that the board of directors locally really is who approves the operating budget for the college moving forward when the president presents that, after hearing from the chief financial officer. So I don't know what mechanism maybe you would recommend, but I think that really is a good idea to at least run that by them and have some conversation with the local board. I think that is probably a good idea.
I would just think, even if it was an informational item, to say this is a policy that's coming down the pipe for them to think about, look at, give any feedback on, that little moment of public comment before we direct what's going to be done. We keep hearing
we've got all 16 college presidents together next week. And so what I can do is ask them to go back to their boards and have the conversation and bring it back.
That'll work. I mean, I think that'll work.
Yep. Paul, what does CPE say?
They don't have any guidelines or controls over budget.
Well, you just need to ask them, what are their guidelines and controls? They're supposed to give us all sorts of advice. So be sure that you put my name on there, that Chairman Stevens says. I'd like to know what their recommendations are for the carryover, because, they've had to deal with Kentucky State and a lot of issues. So I would hope that they would have something, they may call it best practice, but, some feedback is what I'm saying from them.
We can ask.
All right. Next item.
Patsy's got her hand up.
Oh, Patsy, I'm
Excuse me.
sorry.
That's okay. I just wanted to ask one question, and you can let me know if it's appropriate here. But as we're considering these, budgetary items, informational items, reserves, et cetera, one of the ideas, I guess, that I brought forth here locally to think about and wonder if it could be interjected here would be to consider, when we talk about reserves, the possibility of forming some kind of contingency fund at the system level. We've had several very traumatic natural disasters that have impacted our colleges and our local communities. In particular, when you start having damage to college campuses, et cetera, would it be appropriate or not to consider moving forward that we have some type of system level crisis type contingency reserve to support the system in these colleges? Should we, hopefully not, but should we experience other things? I mean, it could be earthquake, it could be tornadoes, it could be more flooding. And those are catastrophic, and they create, as you know, a lot of damage in these communities and recoil. So I just thought this might be a place to bring that idea forward for consideration or not.
Paul?
I think we could certainly bring Andy Casebeer from facilities to talk about how we react to these events and how FEMA gets involved and how facilities gets involved with the insurance agencies and all that, if that would be helpful.
Yes, it would. And while we're talking about facilities, I'd like a report given on what facilities what major construction projects were going on at the community colleges. And then also is to what facilities that at each one of the colleges are not being used, at least for 50% of their programs. So can he provide that, some type of document or some type of cliff notes or so to tell us?
I'm sure Andy can provide the former. I'm not positive about the latter.
Okay, but I think it's important, and I've had a request from a region I think it's important in this meeting is that we add somewhere to the agenda a report about the flooding and the facilities. And then, I know that you've done a good job about providing information on a weekly basis, but I think it's important also that we have a more detailed report of some of the problems at these colleges that we have and what is they're looking to solve these problems. So can you, and I don't know where you would add that. It may be as a board information or a item, but I think that Paul is very important because I've been asked about that. So
I think it might fit in better on Thursday, perhaps, underneath the administrative services report.
That would be fine with me. Anybody else have any objections or concerns about that?
No, but the space utilization is part of the RFP for the vendors.
Yep.
And so we will get a much more thorough evaluation of that. Again, remember, we got data on that before, but it was a snapshot of an estimate. It wasn't really being tracked very well. And so just, kind of to remind you that will be in that as part of that RFP, that'll be part of
Yeah, and I think, Wendy, you're
project.
going to have a long laundry list in your presentation because, as I said, there's a lot of things that we've talked about and those are the things that we need to, in your presentation, is what it's going to address the facility situation. So I certainly appreciate you presenting that. The next item on the agenda is I guess we're ready for the board agenda report on the ACT. Paul, President's report.
Yes, I'll have a president's report.
Okay, well, I figured you would.
Yep.
So KCT Board of Regents report on ACT's conference. Pam or Hannah, which one of you all going to do that?
I believe that's actually going to be under your chair's report. So it's typical that if we have regents attend a conference that they come back and report to the full board about what they learned. So I'm sure that Pam and I could chime in, but typically we would have regents, including you and the others who attended the conference, speak to it about what you learned.
Well, the pressure's on Wendy and Joe and Patsy and Keith, it looks like right there. So, all right, guys, you need to get your notes together so we don't duplicate things. Joe?
So I think going into the board agenda items here, we already covered A and B, I believe.
Yes. Personnel action, Paul, that is you, correct?
That would be Lynn Hillis now, since
Okay.
personnel actions come under her.
Okay. All right. Ratification of student regents election procedure. Pam, is that you?
That's actually Hannah, but either one of us can do it. Hannah has been
Put Hannah's
working
name
with
there.
Natalie Gibson.
Put Hannah's name down there. Yeah. The audit risk report is, and
That would be Lance Mann from
yes,
Dean
and
Dorff.
I want Kimberly Green to introduce him, and we'll go from there. The evaluation of the item E, action evaluation of president's performance goals and objectives. Is that the actual? That's the evaluation. Karen will do that. Report that to the board, Karen Fine.
Yeah, and then G would be
Your performance goals
the
this year.
official approval for 22 and 23
Those are yours, correct?
for the upcoming year. Yes.
Okay. Then strategic plan of the completion of the final report. Who was going to do that? Alicia and Dr. Williams?
It'll be me.
Okay. And a strategic plan going forward.
That'll be me as well.
Okay. And the next item we've already taken care of. Wendy, I had a request, or I guess this is the question to Pam and you both, is that the HR people, and I'm going to go, pardon the expression, I'm going to read this, is the compensation study being developed by the Office of the General Counsel. Is that correct?
Actually, we are shepherding it through and doing the legal parts of it, but the HR employment and compensation team will be working with us in conjunction with whoever gets the compensation and compression study.
Okay, I think that the reasons were all three of these items, such as compensation policy, the compensation study, and the resource optimist analysis, all kind of tie together. So, we want to continue that down the road, continue to march forward and, I think that I'm optimistic that all of these are going to work out to the best of the information that we all are looking for. Wendy, you have a comment on that?
I got lost somewhere in all that. What are you asking me to do?
No, I'm not asking. I just said the comment with the compensation, I was just saying all three of these tie together. The compensation policy, the compensation study.
I don't know if it's my internet or yours, but I'm catching about every third or fourth word.
Okay, I'll slow down then. I'm going too fast. All right. The compensation, the compensation policy, the compensation study, and the resource optimization analysis all fit together. Is that correct?
I do not believe so. The way that we had looked at those, compensation study is actually kind of being undertaken by the new HR person, but the overarching compensation, equity, inclusion, all of that would be part of the RFP that is probably still a few months away. So I don't think we've put off the compensation study in lieu of the RFP. Those are two different projects. What I have understood for the last year is that when the new HR person, which has been hired, got here, that they would be undertaking a review of all that.
Yeah.
Now,
that
Regent
RFP was
Green.
Go ahead.
No, that if you want to interject, go ahead. But I'll just tell you really quickly. Regent Green had made the comment that there were some resources being pulled at the local level with people working on the compensation study, and she had expressed some concern about the RFP project. The RFP project is still weeks to months away from even starting. But what my understanding from Dr. Zarapata and the cabinet in the past has been is that once the new HR person was here, she would be working with the local HR folks and they would be taking a look at compensation across the system. So someone correct me if I'm wrong, but that's how I understand it.
No, that's correct. And the RFP went out, respondents came back. The RFP is being reworked and reissued at this time to try and get, I don't know exactly what the details were. There were some parts that were left out that probably would have drawn more respondents. And so Lynn has worked with General Counsel Duncan's office, and I believe we've got it to a point now where it's going to get reissued.
Okay, but they all three.
Yes, and Lynn did present.
Right.
Lynn did present very briefly to the ROC about that process and why they had to kind of go back to the drawing board with what they were looking at there. Now, once their compensation project has started and it will be looked at as part of the resource optimization as well, to make sure that that is on point and on task and doing what it's supposed to do. But kind of separate, I would not consider those combined in any way.
Yes, I understand that. But they all three are going to hopefully work out together, and we'll be able to do those, is what I'm saying. So, and I appreciate your comments, Wendy and Paul, to clarify that is in that regard. Thank you. Any other questions about the agenda?
I would say on that same topic, Chair Stevens, that we are very sensitive to the fact that, you know, the presidents that we have as advisory on the ROC have been so very aware, and we are sensitive to the fact that staff is feeling, because of the way that things have gone in the past, when there's multiple projects going on across the system, people get very stressed thinking, oh, what's that going to cost me? Or how much time is that going to be? Or how many resources am I going to have to devote to that? You know, our goal on the ROC is to optimize their resources and to not stretch people so thin, and to make recommendations that will actually alleviate the burdens on staff. You know, just like we did with the academic program review, they do that once instead of 16 times and saving all those man hours. We're hoping to do the same with this this RFP for the ROC. Now, as far as the compensation study, I know that Regent Green said that that was going to take a lot of time from the folks on the ground and the colleges. We're really hoping to leave them alone for quite a while in this process, try to get started at system office and then branch out. But we are very sensitive to that. we do not want anyone to feel overwhelmed or like that their whole day is going to get projects. So we will be coordinating that with whoever the vendor is. I still have a very long list of questions, things about the value, how much time it's actually going to take with boots on the ground, and how much of because it really is an invasion or an interruption of their day. We're going to try to pick a vendor who's going to limit that as much as possible, but still be able to get us objective data that we need to make those decisions going forward. So I think that's where those comments came from, was people wondering how much extra work they were going to have to do. We really don't want the company coming in to necessarily use our people, use our data. We really want fresh eyes, fresh perspective, and some primary information coming from them. We know what we see from the inside. We want somebody from the outside to come in and tell us what they see. So I'm really expecting this to be fairly limited as far as having to tap into people or invade people's days from within.
Thank you, ma'am, for your comments. Any other, Pam, do you have or a place on there, you or Hannah one, where Karen Hawkins and Molly Sutherland are going to give a briefing to the board? We talked about that this morning.
Right. Well, that is something that we will discuss in greater length later. Just remember, we do have our executive session for personnel matters and also for potential litigation.
All right. Any other questions from any of the regents or the staff?
Mr. Stevens, it's
Yes,
not
ma'am.
necessarily about this agenda, but moving forward, I'm not sure how much longer I will be on this committee. That's the running joke. So I want to put something out there just for consideration as we look at policy moving forward. I approached through email the Honorable Pam Duncan and asked a few questions about out-of-state students. And this is something where I have a tremendous interest, and I think we really need to be looking at this. And I have read some of the information about, how that came about and with CPE and things like that. I'm still trying to dig a little further into that to see what the limitations and the possibilities are with that. But at some point, if you could direct me on where I could find it myself, or someone within the system without burdening them with a whole lot of work, could help me maybe through ORPA or something like that, find the information perhaps trended over the last 5 to 10 years about how many students we have actually served in-state versus contiguous county versus out-of-state. At least when you look at that, when you're talking 182 to 364 to $637, is that creating a barrier for our potential students? We are putting up more and more WWW classes, which says World Wide Web, which tells me that the globe is the classroom and the internet is the doorway. So why are we still maybe creating this barrier in this way if we don't have to, if we could actually serve students in other states and things like that? So I would just really like to have a little bit more data, to be a little more data informed in the conversation about this. But just on the forefront, looking at this with very limited information, I just think this might be an area where we would have tremendous potential to grow our enrollment. So would I go through this group and say, as we look at policy, I know, of course, tuition would maybe be part of that, or how would you recommend that I move forward just on informing myself and possibly making a more educated statement about it?
Well, I think that clearly has multiple facets. It is a request for information. It's a request for data, which is a little bit different than information. It is also a request or a desire to have this committee and possibly other committees determine how we best expand our reach. And so I think where we begin is probably for you and Hannah and I to sit down and map out exactly what you're asking for, because as Chair Stevens indicated earlier, he does want to follow the procedure whereby we flow requests for information through the chair liaison, who is Hannah, and then out for request, and then back to the board, so that we have it all flowing very smoothly and everyone gets everything that one other regent may have determined they want to see. So I do think the important thing, Regent Jackson, is for us to make sure that we have carefully enunciated what it is that you want. And that would be best by Hannah and I meeting with you.
Yeah, it's multifaceted. CPE controls all of our tuition rates. And we've got, I believe there's some exceptions for contiguous states and things like that, but I think it's going to draw in numerous people for sure.
Yeah, I'm just curious, considering, even when I was in school, back when I was a boy, you hear people talk like that, but, and some of that perhaps was established with the mindset that we wanted to serve our local communities and we had a certain amount of space available and we always wanted to serve our local community first. And that's absolutely true. And by no way am I negating that. That is absolutely the priority. But I'm thinking, our outreach and our methodology and our venue has changed and morphed so much in higher education. Would it be wise, I guess, to just revisit that to see if that is still appropriate, rather than just staying in that? We don't want to go right and this kind of just stay in the middle or veer left. We really want to be moving on parallel tracks and intersecting where we need to. So I just think that maybe would be a future conversation, and I just wanted to bring it to your attention. I don't, again, care to do the homework myself. If someone will direct me to the data point where I can see that, I'll be happy to dig in and look. Because I don't want to add work to anyone, but I'm just really curious about what the layout looks like for the amount of students that we have served and that sort of thing. So I just wanted to bring that forward, and we'll proceed however you best recommend, Pam.
Okay, and we'll
Dr.
be
Sarah.
back in touch and make sure that everyone has the email and the information that we're talking about.
Thank you so much.
Paul, in your presidential report, I'd like to know about staffing shortages, basically system-wide, and where we have a major problem with staffing is in the same way with the systems office is what I'm saying. So if you could report that in very generic is. Also, I'd like to tell those that are participating. You got a question about that, Paul?
I don't think so. Are you talking about open positions that we're having trouble filling?
Yeah. I'm just talking about open positions, problems that you're having. I'm sure a lot of them are nursing, and that is, and what we're trying to do recruitment wise or so to fill those positions. I'm talking about critical positions. Of course, every position is a critical position, but some of them are of higher priority than others. So if you could report that somewhere in your report, I would appreciate it.
Sure.
Right. And then I would tell the participants as we go forward is that I talked to Council Duncan today is we want every region to be as involved in the process as they want to be. And so it's easier for, according on the advice of Ms. Duncan, to form, like Lisa formed last year, ad hoc committees or so. So if you have any suggestions and ideas or any area that you would like for us to dive into, basically we have 2 standing committees, but we can form other committees. But it's my hope that, and there will probably be some, but it's my hope that we think about that. I'm open for suggestions and ideas prior to the meeting in September is, and as we put those together is, we want to encourage all regions to be an active participant in the process of leading KCTCS forward. Any other comments from any of the other regents? Barry, I've not heard a word from you, so.
Well, I've tried to raise my hand a couple times, but it won't let me, so.
Okay, Barry, you got it. Go ahead.
Okay. In regards to following up with what Patsy was talking about, expanding to out-of-state students, I really feel like we're missing the boat by not being more active with going into the high schools and having student recruiters visiting the schools. Are we doing any of that? And are we actively doing it? Or?
Are you asking me, Barry, or I can answer locally? Absolutely. I think dual credit and high school recruitment are probably on the forefront of our efforts here, at least at Big Sandy. We are going to the point that we are requiring everyone to have at least one high school recruitment or middle school recruitment on their PP&E. So it is really a concentrated, concerted effort of all of the faculty and staff here at Big Sandy. I'm sure other presidents, Dr. Zarapata probably could answer better for across the state, but I believe that's definitely one of the areas. One of the things we want to be mindful of, however, is we know that we have the dual credit situation, but we also have a declining population in that age group as well, of students that are completing high school. And, we kind of just have to think about the adult learner and not necessarily exclude, but we don't want to totally focus on high school students and then exclude the adult learner as well. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about, is that balance and looking at every barrier out there and ways that we can remove those barriers for any age student, but definitely students in populations where we haven't tapped at this point.
Pam, you had a comment?
It was prior to this, so it is not about this. I just wanted to remind, and I think that we touched on it briefly, that we will be putting the public comment procedure out as well, so that it will likely show up on this particular board meeting, but we will also have to approve the process at the board meeting as well.
Thank you, ma'am. Barry, you have anything else?
No, I know that we were kind of exposed to that from one of the colleges that came and visited with us, that they actually have student recruiters out in the high schools. And
all 16 of our colleges do.
Okay.
And, it's the one thing to recruit them. The other part of that that's super important is advising and repeated advising to make sure that everything that they're doing is going to transfer into the program that they want.
Well, okay. And because I've got a 19-year-old, he's currently going to BCTC, going to Bluegrass Community College. Neither him nor his sister, that's 24, I don't think received any advising or communications with a BCTC representative while they were going to school at Lexington Christian Academy. I guess that's the reason I'm asking that.
Barry, I think
that's not unusual. And as the mother of two children who went to four-year institutions who took dual credit classes, the same problem. They're not receiving, and that's why I kept asking questions about how many of our dual credit kids actually graduate college early, because a lot of these kids are leaving. I have a nephew now who left Big Sandy with 30, hours going to college. How many of those credit hours actually count toward his degree? Very few of them. So even though they're getting all these dual credit hours, they're still taking 4 years to graduate college, which makes no sense whatsoever. The other comment that I'll piggyback on with what you're saying and what Patsy has said about getting into the high schools, we really need to work with those principals, those superintendents. We need to make sure that we're offering dual credit to a larger population of kids or young adults to make sure that they are getting those opportunities, because Right now, a lot of the schools are using dual credit like a carrot dangling in front of the best of the best. And we really need the other 85% of the student population in the high school who maybe aren't getting college scholarships or don't have extra money from other sources to be able to go to school. We need to be able to offer dual credit, workforce ready, programming to the other 85% of the student body. Those 15, 20% at the top of the class, the cream of the crop, they're going to college anyway. They really are not the ones who are going to get the most benefit out. I mean, they're going to get benefit. But like I said, if you look at the data, they're still taking 4 years to graduate. We'd be better off to be giving these dual credit classes to our 2-year nurses, our respiratory therapists, our machinists, our mechanics, our carpenters, our HVAC guys. Gosh, you can't find an HVAC guy in 5 counties around here that, doesn't put you off for a month because they're so busy. There's just not enough of them. But we're limiting the population of kids who can take dual credit. So I think our focus at the high schools needs to be more on expanding who can actually take the dual credit classes and not just isolate it to this little tiny group of, 10 or 15% of the kids at the very top of the class. And start earlier, sophomore and junior year, not just wait till the end of junior or senior year.
Sorry. Fletcher, I appreciate those comments. And just to wrap up, I guess what you and Barry both are sharing, I think the guided pathway process that we're really focusing on right now is, I believe, going to impact that in a very positive way. And that is to prevent things like people just picking up classes here and there and that sort of thing. It really is just what it says, and that is a guided pathway. It is to really give more structure and guidance to students so that they know if they're going from point A to point B, this is exactly how you get there, so that you don't waste credit, you don't waste time. And also, I was just going to say, also looking more at technical type dual credit, whereas before we were offering a lot of general education coursework, there is now a move in the technical direction as well. So I think we are on the beginning, I guess, of those kinds of interventions. So I appreciate the comments.
I guess I went to the point where I actually scheduled a meeting with an advisor at BCTC for my daughter so she could go seek some counseling for college education. And because she didn't receive anything at school from the campus counselor or from any school. I think they had maybe 1 or 2 events where a different school would come in, but I mean, I'm from the healthcare industry, and we ought to have the drug rep approach to students, and they ought to be tired of seeing KCTC representatives come in and say, hey, we've got all kinds of occupations. We have a wide variety of things that you can pick from, and really expose them to that and help advise them. And I'm just speaking from a parent's perspective, that I see that there's a lot of opportunity for us as a community college system, because right now we could hire a lot of technical trained people. If they were available.
I think very quickly, and then I know Pam Duncan wants to speak too. This is all I will say about that very, very quickly, is just like Dr. Zarapata says, we are doing these things in different colleges in little different ways, but we're all kind of doing them. But we may not necessarily see all of those things that are happening in the trenches at these colleges. But I do think we need a more visible, again, a very structured and intentional regional approach to this. And that was one of the recommendations I made to my interim president, Dr. Sellers, was to create a regional approach. And that's what I called it, was the RACE, which was Regional Approach Connecting Education and Employment. And that is to not only bring the secondary folks on board, but to really create almost an expanded P16 to where you are working with secondary, post-secondary, but you're also working with employers, because we want to make sure all of these dots connect. We don't want a guided pathway to lead the student to nowhere. We want to know that we are really offering programs and sort of guiding the student through what the market says is available for them to actually have a a reasonable job, that is well paying for them. So, we want to bring a lot of different people on this regional group so that we can share all of our different dimensions and how we all fit together in this matrix. So I think hopefully ideas like that can really help us to look at it more at an aerial view, I guess, and make sure that we are making the right decisions for the populations we serve.
Pam?
So I think these are all valid and good points. I'm a little bit concerned that we're straying away from the agenda. And what I would like to do is to capture all of these comments. I think it would be a good idea to include these in a retreat. Potentially, this also sounds to me very much like rock category, in combining resources, et cetera. But I don't want our public not to know that they should have or could have been here for this discussion. So I would request that we go back to the agenda, and if that is to adjourn or go forward on our next item, then I think that's what we need to do. And Hannah and her team will get out information on these discussion items to discuss later.
Thank you, Pam. I was hunting for a ad hoc committee. I think I found one that we can work on in the future. So I appreciate those comments. We'll go down the list again. Joe, you have any comments before we leave?
I do not, but I believe Regent Fletcher has her hand up.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead, Wendy. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I was just going to say, since you told us to divvy up what we learned at the ACCT, I will take the section on parliamentary procedure.
Okay. All right. Joe, you have any other comments or questions?
No, I'll have to re-look at the agenda again and see which one I would like to report on, but I'm sure there's a couple good ones in there.
Well, I would ask Hannah to send those out to us, please, and then we'll pick one and I'll pick the one that nobody wants. So, and try to mumble through it's what I'm saying is. So, yes, if we'll do that. Wendy, you have anything else?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Can we go back and briefly look at the agenda? And I know we've added a couple of items. Hannah, can we do that? And then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Yes, I have the agenda pulled up, and it looks like we'll strike the board officer elections, as that, of course, took place yesterday. We will add either a sub-report, or I'll speak with Dr. Zarapata on the best place to add an update on facilities and specifically related to flood damage. And then we will also add a update on staffing shortages. And depending on how this request from Regent Jackson flows, we may have some information to present on tuition and the various categories of it for our students.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other questions? Any other comments from any region?
Well,
Oh,
just
go ahead.
one comment from me. I'm wondering if, with the hiring report, would you want that put under item D, talent, inclusion, and workplace culture? Because I'd be doing that with Lynn.
That's fine.
Okay.
That's fine. That's fine.
That's all.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's all I've got. Thank you.
And just to clarify, that's because that has been separated from administrative services now, correct?
That's correct.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Yeah, and it'll be great for everybody to meet Lynn. We were really impressed with her. We liked her in the Rock, so that's cool.
All right. Any other questions?
May we adjourn?
All right. Pam?
Second.
All right. Pam, we ready to go?
By consensus, we are adjourned.
All right. See you all
Thank you.
in September. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.